So the topic that we wanted to talk about now is homosexuality and its moral consequences and the difference maybe between our positions. And you were saying you think this is an important subject.
Yeah, I think it's a very important subject because a lot of what I was saying was that a lot of young people, even though when I speak to them about Christianity, they want to make a decision and become a Christian, but they say, but Christians are known for being terrible to homosexuals, and they see that as a barrier. They're like, I don't want to be that way, right? So I think it's what's your impression of Christianity and homosexuals?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, it seems to me like I grew up in the United States, so that should be a upfront statement. But in my experience, Christianity has been a force for shaming gay people and spreading this idea that homosexuality isn't natural somehow, or if it is natural, it's like a choice that people make, and that people who are attracted to members of the same gender are just as free to choose to be attracted, or at least exercise something to become attracted to people of opposite gender. And I think that that's been very damaging. And that's actually one of the things that drove me away from my former religion, which was the Baha'i religion, was its view on gay people and gay relationships. So I'm interested to know what you think.
As far as I understand the Christian point of view, that my opinion, I understand that the opinion is very, very different, right? But across different people, right? But the Bible speaks towards homosexual acts, right? And the Bible says that homosexual acts are not right, that they're wrong, right? The Bible has nothing to say about people desiring, people's desires for the opposite sex. They don't say that, the Bible doesn't say this is wrong. But the Bible describes that sexual relations are to be kept within a certain area, and that's within a monogamous marriage with a person of the opposite sex. This is what the Bible describes as to be God's ideal situation for marriage and for sexual activity to be expressed.
So when you say the Bible, are you talking about the Jewish Bible, the New Testament, both?
Both. I'm talking about both.
So you see monogamous relationships as being required in the Jewish Bible?
Required? I don't think that anyone's required to marry. But if you want to...
Oh, sorry. I just meant in contrast to polygamy.
Right. Yeah, I recognize there's polygamy in the Bible. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, I was just interested in that one.
Okay, well, as far as polygamy goes, because you get asked this quite a bit, like for example, Solomon, right? The wisest man in the Bible, right? Ended up falling into idolatry, and he fell into multiple wives, right? But there's a big difference in the Bible between things that are descriptive and things that are prescriptive, right? The Bible speaks of many things that could be wrong, like for example the book of Judges, right? There's just terrible things that happen in the book of Judges, but it's describing what's happening. It's not saying that we should all participate in these things and these are wonderfully moral things. When the Bible speaks of polygamy, it's being descriptive. It's not at once saying that this is a right thing to do.
Okay, well I guess we're kind of getting off topic on this, but we've talked about this a little bit before, but when the Bible talks about, like the stories in Judges are very different from its descriptions of polygamy, in that it's very
Condemning for things in
Judges.
Judges.
It's condemning, or at least it's lamenting the things that happened in Judges.
But when polygamy might just be talked about but not...
It's not even just talked about, it's actually, celebrated, it seems to me. But I mean, that's obviously an interpretation.
Okay.
Like Solomon's wives and concubines are described in a kind of adulatory, in a praising kind of language. That's like, look at how masculine he was, which is consistent with our understanding of the ancient Israeli culture.
Yeah.
Would have seen sexual prowess as being a marker of a good and qualified leader.
All right.
So But I'm not sure. This is like really off topic now. Do we
Okay,
wanna...
we can hit that one. But as far as homosexuality goes, right?
Yeah.
To condemn people is wrong, right? It's wrong to do this. Like everybody knows these verses, like God didn't send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but God came to actually give His life for people.
Right.
The woman that's caught in adultery, Jesus' word for her is like, I don't condemn you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is an attitude that a lot of Christians take. I have no problem telling my homosexual friends that what I think the actions that they're engaging in are wrong according to God's law.
Right.
But I don't do this from a place of condemnation, right?
Yeah.
I think that because of my friendship with them, I have the ability to speak truth, right?
Yeah.
But this idea and this thing that's happened in Christian culture, where we condemn homosexuals and treat them as less than humans, this is just terrible. But I won't take any steps back and say that there's any misinterpretation of what's going on in the Bible.
Okay.
God has been very serious about sexual activities to be confined in this area, and that this is what's best for human flourishing. This is a part of God's original plan. And in the same way that me, I have certain desires that I have to actually fight against as well, because of how God has contained sexual activity. And even though I may have urges that I feel are very natural, right, I still must act. That's what God is calling people to be. God is calling to be a tested people who don't just do whatever their emotions tell them or our urges tell them, because we're not defined by our feelings and our biology. We're defined by what we do. Like we highly value people who have fought out of their situations and urges and fought against certain things to make great accomplishments. So I don't feel that I'm defined by my sexual urges. I feel that I'm defined by what I do, and I believe that's why the Bible only speaks towards homosexual behavior as being wrong.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to say I very much appreciate what you're saying, that Christians need to be caring and loving towards gay people and not viewing them as like disgusting and condemning them personally. Right? Okay, that's cool. I appreciate that.
And they should be welcomed in our churches, because we have people in our churches who are having premarital sex, right? And they think that it's right. And we welcome them in our churches, no problem, nobody bats an eye, right? But sometimes in our churches, the homosexual can come in and be ostracized.
Right.
That's why in our city, we actually have, I think it's 3 or 4 churches that are homosexual churches, because they feel ostracized from other churches, and this is just wrong.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess my problem still, though, is that there doesn't seem to be good moral reasons for us to think that gay behavior is wrong. And that's sort of that's the same problem I had with the Baha'i religion, my former religion, is they say exactly the same thing, right? They don't condemn individuals, they hate the sin, not the sinner, all of this stuff. But that still seems to me very problematic, because at the end of the day, we're still saying that gay behavior, or the expression of love between two people who happen to be of the same gender, is shameful or out of line with God's will, for us. And
do you think that when you're saying the expression of love, that doesn't codify all sexual behavior, right? Like not with both straight people and homosexual people, right? That's not what sexual activity necessarily is.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it can, and and it should be.
Sure. But what I'm saying is that if we restrict our view to that form of sexual reciprocity, interaction, that the Christian would otherwise encourage and view as beautiful, it all of a sudden becomes a shameful, undesirable thing, just because we say that the gender of the two people is the same. I just don't see how that works. Like I recognize that there are destructive aspects to promiscuity and having sex with people that you have absolutely no emotional commitment to, or one person thinks they have an emotional commitment and the other person is being deceptive.
I think that's amazing that you can see that.
Well, that's common ground.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think there are a lot of problems with our current society in terms of sex. But if we concentrate on loving sexual relationships between two consenting adults, I just can't see how that could possibly be wrong, merely because those two adults share the same body parts. Do you know what I mean? Like, that just seems so out of sync with what we would require from an all-good God.
Right, because we're a people that understand the power of love, that love is something that we value very highly, and so how could anybody deny someone else love, right?
Yeah.
But that would be to presuppose that love is the most important thing in life and the goal of life, right? Because I have homosexual Christian friends, right, who are married, and they've decided to leave this aspect of God's, like what God has said, because they say that love is more important, right? But that's just simply just not what God says, right? Like, there's not one thing that's more important. God is calling a tested people, like he's calling people to be tested and to fight against urges, because the goal of life is, life is so very short if we're people who accept eternity, right? If we accept eternity, life is very short, and so God is not calling people just to have a perfect life and a fun life, here and now. He's calling it tested people for eternity. And this is just a law that God has called down to say this is what is best for human flourishing and for his people.
But I mean, that seems like just such a tragedy to say that the most important thing is not love. And it also seems to stand in contradiction to what you said earlier in our previous conversation about love being the highest thing to want with God. That a loving relationship with God is the greatest thing. And it just seems odd if the path to loving God involves foregoing loving relationships with other human beings. Or
I don't think that sex is the only way that you can love other human beings. I think that you can have a loving relationship with someone without engaging in sexual behavior. I think this is quite possible.
But you would never prescribe that to heterosexual couples. You would never prescribe celibacy for heterosexual couples.
If there was a way that they couldn't get married, yeah, I would have no problem. I can't picture a situation. I think you're right, but
yeah, but this is a chicken and the egg sort of thing. You're saying because gay people are not able to get married within God's law, therefore they must, if they want to be in a relationship with one another, a romantic relationship, committed romantic relationship, then they have to be celibate. But what I'm saying is, why did God make that prohibited? Why would God make marriage between two people of the same sex or the same gender prohibited?
I have my own opinions on that, and this is something that I think about quite a bit, but I'm happy to stay in the position the one that I would express, is that this is just a part of God's original creation, and this is part of God's original plan, and this is what God has prescribed as being the best way to live and to marry and to interact in sexual behaviors. As far as on atheism, for example, of course they should get married and have sex and do what they want. Of course it makes sense in atheism. This is just strictly a Christian point of view, that for the Christian, this is what we should be participating in. And this is our message for the world as well. It's why atheists hear about it, is because we want to tell you what God has made a part of his original plan and what God's truth is. But I understand completely the atheist who says why and what's wrong with that, because on atheism, of course you would follow these things.
Well, I guess what I have a problem with is there doesn't seem to be all of these dire social consequences that you're saying, or at least implying that accepting gay marriage and condoning gay sexual behavior would have on society, that it would compromise human flourishing or any of this?
Yeah, that's not my point.
Okay.
I don't know what social consequences would come from it. I live in, our city is a very pro-gay relationship. We just had Pride Week here, and I had didn't think there were any social problems. I don't know what that would look like long term. I have no idea. But that's not the reason that I reject homosexual sexual behavior. I don't do that. I do it solely based on the Word of God and for the life of the Christian, not because I see the problems with it socially. And people discuss that, and they say, what's going to happen if we allow homosexuals to marry, the things will happen in society, and I don't know what will happen.
But it seems like you said God commands what he commands about homosexuality because of his understanding of human flourishing.
Right. This is like God's plan for this was for when Adam and Eve were created. His plan was a one man and one female to procreate it, etc. Right. And so this was part of his plan with the goal of human flourishing in mind. And so what would look like, I don't know, right? Creation is very skewed now, right? So I don't know what we've accepted to be best. I just understand and rest in the fact that this was God's plan.
Well, I mean, I guess...
And I want to be a part of it.
I guess this is another point where it just comes down to faith. And this is another reason why I have a problem with faith, is that it persuades people who are otherwise good, loving, caring, members of society to condemn behaviors between consenting adults that by all accounts hurt nobody and foster what would foster a beautiful exchange of just as sex between heterosexual couples who are in love and want to express their mutual attraction to one another is a beautiful thing. I think that sex between two people who are the same gender, who are in love and want to, it just seems so tragic to me that you think that that's somehow in contradiction to human flourishing or human well-being or something, because it escapes me why anybody would think that without religion.
Well, I don't base what's good on if it feels good, do it. I don't think that's the right way to look at things. Because, for example, we immunize children, and this child thinks the most terrible thing that's ever happened to him, right? But it's for good, right? So if it feels good, do it. Doesn't make any sense. So I think that's what you're appealing to when you appeal to say a homosexual relationship where they love each other. It feels good. It's good for them. It's good for the people around them.
No, I'm not.
For example, they can adopt children. They can help these children. There's a lot of good there. But I just think that just because it feels good doesn't make it good.
Yeah, but that is such a trivialization
okay.
of what is going on between two people who are in love. To say that advocating for their right, morally, to be able to express their mutual attraction to one another through sexual
I don't want to stand
It's such a trivialization to say, oh, you're just saying that's what feels good, they should be able to do it.
I'm saying when I justify if things are right or wrong, I don't want to stand in anyone's way to express love for each other. I don't want to do that at all.
And
I'm only saying that on the Christian worldview, to be a Christian and to live according to God's law is paramount for us. That's what we want to do. Do I want to force someone else to do this? No, of course not.
No, yeah, and I appreciate that. All I'm saying is that morally, to condemn gay people's sexual behavior, that is what I think turns people off to Christianity, even when it's done, and maybe even especially when it's done with this loving tone of voice. Because it's almost more condescending and more tragic when people who otherwise would have nothing to say about gay people's relationships all of a sudden have an opinion on it, and it's a condemning opinion.
I don't think that just because we have different worldviews, that I'm condemning anybody, because I have a very different worldview than the homosexual who's engaging in homosexual sexual activity. We have different worldviews, but I don't think that because I express my worldview to him, that him or her, that I'm condemning them. I might say that their actions on my worldview are wrong, and according to my God, it's wrong. I'm not trying to condemn them, because God himself, his message to them is, I don't condemn you, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a question of semantics. I'm not trying to commit you to saying the word condemn. All I'm trying to say is that you're saying it's wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it's tragic
I would
that
say,
you say it's wrong when there doesn't seem to be any humanistic reason. There doesn't seem to be any reason in terms of like, and this is what I'm saying. I think this is what drives people away from Christianity, because they want Christianity to encourage, because there's so many beautiful things about Christianity, right? It encourages charity, it encourages pro-social behavior and caring about your neighbor and caring for the poor. All of these things touch elements of our human nature that draw us, that attract us to Christianity. But then all of a sudden, it turns to this issue or this dynamic between two people who are in a loving, committed relationship, and it says that is wrong. And people...
Would you say that, like, you're talking about one aspect of homosexual behavior, this aspect of the loving relationship, right?
Sure.
I don't think that you would say that's the majority of sexual behavior that goes on in the world today, right?
I don't know.
So
I'm not trying to make
that's true.
any
I think that would be true on both homosexual and heterosexual sexual behavior.
Right.
The majority of it is not this small percentage of this loving,
Sure, I don't know.
committed sexual act.
I don't know, but the point is you think that loving, committed sexual act is wrong.
I think that it's as wrong as premarital heterosexual sex.
Sure, but that is
I think that it's as
unfortunate
wrong.
because...
I think that it's as wrong as polygamy. I think that it's as wrong as other things that fall outside of the box of heterosexual, monogamous, marital sex.
But it seems to me that marriage is just an expression of the commitment that two people find themselves in. It's not like so marriage doesn't create the commitment, it's just an expression of it.
Okay.
Okay? So you can find gay couples that are just as committed to one another as any heterosexual couple.
I'm sure that you could.
So, for all intents and purposes, they're emotionally married.
Right.
Right? And yet you condemn, or no, you don't condemn, sorry. You say that the expression of mutual attraction that they engage in is wrong.
I don't think that's the only expression of mutual attraction.
I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying you do say that is wrong.
I would say that any sexual activity outside of heterosexual, monogamous, marital sex is wrong.
Yeah, but that seems tragic to me because everything is the same.
But
the emotional commitment is the same.
But of course you would say that's wrong based on atheism.
It's not based on atheism. It's just based on a human empathic understanding that is stunted or is fogged by religion. And that's what I think is the problem.
But if you're interested in the idea, like, if God exists and if he has rules for human flourishing, then it would be a different ballgame, right? So when we tackle the issue of homosexual sexual acts, I'm presupposing that God exists, right? And has purposes for people and has purposes for the world. When you're coming at the issue, you're coming at there's no God and there's no purposes for people and the world. And that people, any happiness that they can find, they should go for it, and of course, right? So of course I understand that point of view, but we have the main problem is our presuppositions and where we're coming from. If anything, the only thing I'm ever going to appeal to is the Word of God. I'm going to say the Word of God says this. That's not something that you're going to.
No, I don't think that our common ground is as far apart as you're making it seem right now. Because I actually think that if God has purposes for us, those purposes are what they are because of human nature, which you say God created, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, hypothetically, if God created humans in a certain way, then it follows that certain purposes just emerge like as a product of human beings being made in a certain way. And those purposes are good whether or not there is a mind purposing them. And the reason why they're good is because of human nature. Whether or not that human nature was designed to be the way it is. So it's just like if a car, let's say cars evolve naturally, okay? It's still true that you have to put a certain kind of lubricant in the engine and power it with a certain kind of petrol and put air in its tires. It has nothing to do with the fact that the manual says that. It's not the manual that makes it that way for the car.
Right.
It's the nature of the car that makes it that way.
Right.
Right? So the designer...
But the manual will prescribe the best way for that car to flourish.
Yes.
So,
And you can actually test it. You can try putting water in the gas tank and see if it works. It doesn't work. But we test the acceptance of sexual relations between loving same-sex couples, and we don't find the things that you're talking about. So again, it seems to me that we have to take it on faith that there's something wrong with what's going on there. Because by all appearances, it's a beautiful expression that's going on there.
I would say as far as that goes, like I don't think that you can test it, right? I don't think you can test to see if heterosexual or homosexual acts are good for anybody. I don't think there's a way of testing that. But for example, there's a lot of things that we perceive as being good that would feel good, and we can't find any reason for them not to be good, that actually would have consequences the Bible describes, like for example greed, for example, right? Like I could seek after money and I can do, but people would tell me you can do lots of good things with this money, you can do this and that, but then the Bible strictly speaks against greed and speaks against greed very condemningly, right? It actually says that greed is something very wrong, right? And so but I would say from my natural feelings, for me to succeed, to greed, and to fall into this greed, that's something I need to really watch out against and keep my actions I need to fight against my urges and fight against my biology.
Yeah. I guess we're sort of talking past one another on this point, because it seems to me that you're saying two things that are in contradiction. One of which is God prescribes what he prescribes because it's in the best interest of human beings. And when we don't follow God's commandments, then we actually suffer for it. And what I'm saying is that we can actually see what society is like, and we can see what couples are like when we forbid them from engaging in same-sex relationships, sexual being accepted. And that it doesn't have any of those consequences you're talking about. And you're saying, first of all, we can't do that, we can't observe that. And then second of all, that's not the point, because it's just about obeying God for his purpose. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
my short answer, which I've said, is just that like the reason I think that homosexual acts are wrong is because God has prescribed something, and I trust him.
And why has God prescribed it?
And God has prescribed this because a part of his plan is for human flourishing, and and that's his plan, and I trust him.
Because human flourishing is good.
Yes.
And human flourishing is compromised by people having same-sex sexual relations.
I don't know what the consequences would be.
But you believe it's compromised.
Yes, I believe that God's plan is that if God exists, then his plan has got to be the best way to go.
Yeah, but I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, do you know that quotation from Steven Weinberg about without religion, good people do good things and bad people do bad things.
Yeah.
But for good people to do bad things, that takes religion.
I think that good people do bad things without religion every day.
But for people like yourself and my entire former religion, to lovingly tell other people that they're doing something that's immoral, that takes religion. Sorry, to lovingly tell people that they're doing something that harms nobody and that is an expression of love between them, to tell them that that is wrong, that takes religion. And that's what the real harm of religion is in the world today, is that tendency to recognize behaviors that have absolutely no harm to society and actually are beneficial to society. I would claim that encouraging same-sex relationships is beneficial to society.
I'm not willing to concede that homosexual acts don't hurt anybody.
Right.
I'm not willing to concede that.
Okay.
I don't
So
know.
that would be
I don't know if I could lay out the case for it right now.
Yeah.
As far as that quote, I would have a lot to say on that.
Yeah.
But I would have a lot to say on that. So.
Yeah. So would I actually. But we'll end it there.